Why don't we start the Irish way and I'll ask you what your weather's like? What's it bloody well like there? Is it freezing?
No, it's nice. It's sunny. The leaves are changing, and it's a cornucopia of color. And it's not that cold right now. It's probably about 12 degrees Celsius and sunny.
Bit like ourselves then, really.
Yeah, oh yeah. No, it's not. We're not living in igloos here, despite contrary to myth.
So listen, we're on to discuss an extremely interesting unsolved murder case that is now offering a reward of $35 million, Canadian dollars.
Canadian dollars, which would work out to, I think, around 50 million euros, I think.
Okay. So I know you Canadians are pretty crazy lot, but is that an extraordinary amount of money over there for a case, for a reward?
Oh, it's off the charts. It's completely off the charts. Normally, you're looking at 50,000 max.
Yeah,
and this is or 100, but this is really off the charts.
So what's going on here? And the victims are obviously the victims. Barry Sherman and his wife Honey were massively wealthy themselves, billionaires.
That's correct.
So tell me a little bit about them, who they were and what happened, firstly.
Well, there was a story years ago, and I'm reminded of Barry Sherman, that I covered in New York about a slumlord who was murdered. And the headline we ran on the front page was, "Who didn't hate him?" The list of suspects is long. He's been referred to as a man without any redeeming qualities, as a despicable human being, and other sorts of things.
Why? What did he do so bad, apart from make loads of money?
He just screwed a lot of people. Barry Sherman, his uncle, a man named Lewis Winter, owned a company called Empire Labs. Now, he ended up with Empire Labs that made drugs of various and sundry kinds in the late 1960s. Now, his uncle, Lewis Winter, he died, and 17 days later, his wife died. I'm not sure who died first, and that left 4 young orphans who were in their will were slated to get 20% of Empire drugs. But through slippery machinations and whatnot, those kids got nothing, and Barry Sherman ended up with the ball, took the money he sold from that, and he launched a company called Apotex. Apotex is the world's, the company's been sold now, but the world's largest maker of generic drugs.
So they're the kind of things, if you go in over the counter and you look for a particular drug, they say to you, do you want the, one without the name on it, basically the same thing.
That's exactly it. Now, he made his fortune when copyrights or patents would pass on certain drugs. He would go in and start manufacturing the knockoffs and whatnot. So he was widely hated by the pharmaceutical industry, and he was litigious as hell. He would sue his own mother if he thought she was getting one over on him. They were, the couple were well connected, well known in the Canadian Jewish community. They gave millions to Israel and other Jewish sort of causes. But there was this, dark aspect hanging over the clouds. And I mean, he was a very unique character. He would drive, his cars until they died. I think his wife bought him a brand new sports car for his birthday, and he told her to take it back. He preferred driving his 16-year-old Mustang that was not your slick Mustang, but when they'd become a more pedestrian sort of car. And, he was a workaholic. That they'd go on family vacations and whatnot, and he would spend the whole time doing paperwork and things like that. But the company became, a multi-billion-dollar concern. I mean, he was, rich beyond rich.
So apart from the fact that he was a shark in business and, the couple were obviously very well known, they had a family and they obviously had people who loved them and, they would have been popular in their own circle, I've no doubt. But on the December 15th, 2017, an enormous tragedy befell the whole family. And he was, 75 and his wife was 70. So they were elderly people.
Yes.
Just describe what happened then.
Well, what happened? They were last seen, I think, around noon hour at his company's offices, Apotex, not far from where they lived, and to go over some real estate plans. They had planned to sell their mansion on Old Colony Road for $7 million, and she wanted to build a new palace, closer to the center of the city in Forest Hill, a wealthy neighborhood in Toronto. They had met the realtor and I guess maybe some architects or designers or whatnot at the office. And that was the last time anyone saw them alive. Fast forward 2 days, and a real estate agent showing their house with a couple found them tied together by their pool, and they had been strangled to death. She had a mark on her face, which indicates that she had been hit, but by whom that wasn't clear.
So the couple who were looking to buy the house basically walked in onto the crime scene along with the real estate agent.
That's correct, and it gets worse for anybody who's like you and I who've covered these sorts of things in the past. Is that the cops completely blew it? Now, just a bit of background: the Toronto Police Homicide Unit has one of the most spectacular clearance rates in North America. And well over 80%. Now that came after this time under the direction of Detective Inspector Hank Nzinga. But this was initially ruled a murder-suicide, and there were 20 things, sort of that you and I would walk in and say, yeah, that doesn't add up. That isn't right. And particularly the positioning of the bodies and different things like that. So it had been ruled a murder-suicide, and then within weeks it was updated to a double murder. But by that time, because the first, when you get in there for cops, particularly forensic people, that's the time to strike, when you get your evidence, when you get your things from the vacuum cleaner, you do all that niggly sort of stuff that solves a lot of crimes, and that didn't happen. So
did they not do the proper forensics on the scene, despite the fact that they were looking at it as a murder-suicide? Murder-suicide is always a little bit blurred lines, but there still would have been a crime committed of murder by one individual before they took their own life. They were suggesting that he had killed her, I presume, if she'd a mark on her face.
That's correct.
Would they not have needed to do the proper forensic crime scene work, despite the fact that they felt they weren't looking for another suspect?
I don't think it was a matter of them not doing any forensics, but I think that the detective in charge was certain that it was a murder-suicide. So that I think they didn't do the normal thorough job they would have, because it's like a person lying dead on the ground. There's the gun and there's the other guy. So,
yeah, it can often be seen as a family issue sometimes. I think there is some controversy around a lot of those.
Certainly. And she wasn't necessarily a pleasant personality either.
And what was the motive that they were looking at on the murder-suicide? I mean, there was hardly money owed.
Well, no, there was money owed, Nicola. There was money owed. And this gets, into, motive and suspects. I mean, one gentleman, an entrepreneur named Frank D'Angelo, Barry Sherman had lost $100 million in investments with him. Mm-hmm. There was a Iranian-backed property at the primo piece of real estate in Toronto, and Barry Sherman wanted out of that deal. I mean, he was much savvier when it came to pharmaceuticals than he was to other investments. And that was $150 million.
But still, they weren't facing being on the breadline, or there was no suggestion of that.
No.
Yeah, it was more.
His son owed him somewhere in the vicinity of $50 million for his, various and sundry entrepreneurial escapades, if you will, including storage units. So, even though he's, a billionaire and whatnot, you start tallying up the money and the lawsuits and all this sort of stuff. And, no matter how you look at it, it's a good chunk of change.
Mm-hmm. So what changed the police mind then that this was not a murder suicide, that in fact a murder had been committed on that property?
Autopsies. The autopsies confirmed that it was in fact a double homicide. Mm. But part of the thing is that because of some of that forensic evidence, not being captured and logged and whatnot early on in the investigation, no matter who was investigating, they were going to be behind the eight ball. No matter what. And police did in fairly quick order within, not within weeks, made a change on who was investigating and their approach on it. And they do have said repeatedly they have a working theory, but they're not releasing it.
And just to get down maybe just a little bit of the detail of the actual murder, we go back to what you said. They were at their indoor pool and both were tied to the railings with a belt or
leather
some
belt,
sort of a...
Yeah.
Okay. So they were obviously overcome by an individual and one killed after the other. I mean, was money being extorted from them? Was this seen as being a torture, some sort of an exercise to take money off them or to threaten them? Did it go too far? Or
I think the police view, and this is a view I happen to share, is that this was a straight out hit. It was the intention was not to extort, not to not for any gain other than just to simply take these two off the board. I think, I've heard some people say, well, maybe Honey was the target. No, I don't think so. It was Barry that was the target. And she was just collateral damage. But part of it is that too, it's like the old, Latin saying of cui bono. I mean, who benefits, right? A lot of people benefited by not having to pay, Barry Sherman back the hundreds of millions of dollars he was owed.
Just off the top of my head as well, I mean, whoever this individual or individuals were who did this had to be trusted enough to be let into the home. Was there signs of a break-in, or was it suspected that they let this individual in?
There was no signs of a break-in. Now, the one thing is that I'm not sure quite how you do it, but for estate agents and whatnot, there was a lockbox. And if you had the combination to the lockbox or cracked it open, you would get the key. But there was also they had I guess one of their bathrooms had been repainted or some such thing. And, that window was open, obviously, to air out the bathroom. And they also typically left their back door open, despite, the dough involved. So, but there were never any signs of a break-in.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, a contract killer would more than likely pay somebody to shoot them and to stay as far away forensically from the victims as possible. Whoever carried out this murder literally would have had to have their hands all over them, both of them.
Well, yeah, that's correct. Or they would have to know how to get in there. So, I mean, that's where you're getting a plot. I don't think it's a murder in a vacuum, that there was just, some psychopath decided I'm going to kill two rich people. Someone, any number of people could have benefited from the demise of Barry Sherman.
And that was December, as I said, 2017. Why are we still talking about this now? Why is this case not solved? And why is this money, and I think it was only late last year, that extra $25 million was put on to make that reward $35 million. And that was by the couple's son, Jonathan Sherman. Why is this case still open and unsolved?
I think it's because they didn't, they didn't get the jump on it that they needed, at least forensically, to perhaps ID the killer. I mean, they have CCTV of who fits a person who fits in with the timeline in the area. That they believe that's the killer. Now, this person walks with a limp. They don't have a shot of his face, but yourself, if you go in to Pittsburgh on a Tuesday, you pop somebody, jump on a plane, you're gone. You're in the wind, and
those early mistakes, really, and that kind of initial belief that this was a murder-suicide caused the biggest problem in this, I take it. When was that CCTV released to the public?
Yes, yeah, we ran pictures of the suspect, and it was this was a person with a limp. And a person with the limp had been seen in the area by witnesses and whatnot, but nobody got a good look at their face. I mean, part of the view is that she made a run for it to try to make a phone call, and got hit and then was dragged back where Barry was. The other thing is I mean, the son has basically established a parallel investigation with one of the country's top criminal lawyers and a number of retired detectives. But I mean, I don't know how much weight I put toward that effort as being anything as staying out in front. Now that, I don't think that's going to get me in trouble or us in trouble, but I mean, I covered the funeral, and Jonathan Sherman's eulogy was probably the most disingenuous thing I'd ever heard in my whole life. Months after his father died, Jonathan Sherman fired the longtime president of the company, who worked, a longtime friend of Barry Sherman's. They worked closely together. And then, a couple years after that, he just sold the company.
Is this investigation very active in Canada, in Toronto? Is there regularly appeals for information? Will they look at using the anniversary coming up in December as a reason to kind of, ask people to come forward again?
Well, they may, but I think, as I said, I think there is a working theory, and I think cops know who did it. I just think that who was behind it, but they just can't connect the dots, and I think that that's something going forward. There hasn't been much on it in really the last 2 years. I mean, there's been bits and bites and little things over there, but nothing, no aha moment or anything that, a journalist like you or I could say, okay, that's good. That little crumb, I can build that out and work on it. There hasn't been.
And what about that money, that reward, that absolutely enormous amount of money that's waiting there for anybody who can come forward to solve this murder? Is that not creating a network of sort of amateur sleuths and, is it not bringing up all sorts of crazies as well who are looking to get out there and to try and claim that?
Well, yeah, I think, and I think that's one of the things. But as I said, this sort of thing muddies things. It doesn't bring clarity, these sorts of appeals, because, there is one detective working full time on the Sherman case, but there's been zero movement on it, at least, in the public eye. And that will probably, I imagine that we're probably coming up, I think it's 5 years that they generally do, so it'll be this year, I think, or that where it flips over to the cold case unit. And the Toronto Police cold case unit is exceptional. Mm-hmm. What happens there, I don't know. But right now, there's, no justice for Barry and Honey Sherman. Their kids are sitting on piles of money. People that owed them money are off the hook, and, make that of...
Does that happen with every case that isn't solved in Canada, that it just flips immediately into the cold case unit after 5 or 6 years?
Yeah, typically, usually it's 5 years, and then it goes to the cold case unit, and they bring, fresh sets of eyes on it, and a lot of the people in that unit, I mean, they're exceptional. Is that what they bring to it is a lot of outside of the box thinking, mm-hmm. that may not have crossed anyone's mind, or an avenue unpursued.
And of course, one of the things they often do is revisit a crime scene when they, launch a cold case investigation. So I'd just ask you finally, what has happened to that crime scene, that house, that luxurious home that they lived in?
That crime scene has been demolished. That is no longer a part of the issue. That house has been destroyed.
The house has been destroyed and the site sold or something.
So yeah, that I think they got it. I think they got everything out of it that they possibly could have, but they were too late. I mean, there were, maids in there. There were, it was just a disaster for a crime scene.
Mm. You see, don't they say it's the first? Is it the 48 hours before a murder and the 24 hours after that are the most vital?
Well, yeah, no, that's absolutely gracious. Well, and I'm sure you've watched hundreds of episodes of the first 48 as well.
You can, indeed. But look, we'll keep an eye on this case, Brad. We might come back to it at some stage if there is developments in it, because
you'll be the first to know.
Thank you very much. Nice to hear from you.
You take care of yourself.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.